Have you ever felt the ghost of someone you lost? How did you confront it? The overcast sky loomed heavy over the small, weathered church where mourners gathered in muted clusters. Gray clouds mirrored the somber weight pressing down on the narrow wooden pews, where Mary sat alone, her shoulders hunched beneath an oversized flannel shirt that swallowed her fragile frame. Her auburn hair fell in loose strands around pale, weary skin that seemed to glow faintly in the diffused daylight. The steady drip of late autumn rain tapped against the stained glass windows, a slow, relentless percussion accompanying the preacher's low, resonant voice. Each word a litany of loss, remembrance, and finality tugged at the edges of Mary's fragile composure. Her eyes flickered to the rows of unfamiliar faces, her husband's distant relatives, their eyes thin slits of judgment and cold indifference, whispering barely concealed doubts about her place here. A sharp intake of breath caught in Mary's throat as a woman 3 pews away fixed her with a sour glance. Whispers rippled like a quiet storm. She was barely tolerated when he was alive. Always outsiders. The brittle sound of hushed conversations grating against delicate silence, words sharp enough to cut through the thick quilt of grief. Mary pressed her fingers into the fabric of the oversized shirt, the only tangible connection to the man whose absence echoed in every still corner. The weight of isolation sank into her deeper than the cold autumn air seeping beneath the old church doors. Her gaze fell to the faded photograph clutched in her shaking hands, a memorial snapshot of a wedding day consumed by happier light, now cloaked in shadows. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the ancient oak trees, their skeletal branches scraping against the stained glass like frantic whispers from the past. The faint creak of the church floorboards under shifting feet contrasted starkly with the choir's soft hymn, a haunting melody laced with sorrow, impossibility, and fading hope. A stifled sob rose from somewhere behind her. Mary blinked, clutching the photograph tighter. Another hand reached out, tentative and unsure, brushing briefly against her own in a fleeting act of solace barely noticed amid the sea of estrangement. The world narrowed to the raw, aching pulse of her own breath, the quiet sounds of a church filled with ghosts both living and lost. Her lips parted as the preacher spoke of forgiveness, of letting go, but the words felt like icy water running over open wounds. Mary's eyes glistened, reflecting fractured flickers of hope and dread, the subtle tremor of a heart caught between grief and the desperate yearning for peace. The camera pulled back slowly, framing Mary's solitary figure amid the vast emptiness, accentuating the gulf between her fragile presence and the indifferent weight of absence. A sudden hush fell as the final note of the hymn quivered into silence. The echoes lingered, hanging low, an invisible question suspended in the cool, muted air. How does one confront a past haunted beyond the grave? Outside, the rain eased into a soft drizzle, its gentle patter a lullaby for broken souls. Mary's footsteps echoed hollowly in the cavernous entryway of the house she once shared with her husband, each creak of the worn floorboards a whispered reminder of absence. The front door shut softly behind her, sealing out the damp chill of the autumn rain, but the cold clung stubbornly to the air within, wrapping around her like a dissolving shroud of comfort. Her hands trembled as she absent-mindedly pulled the oversized flannel shirt tighter against her slender frame, the familiar fabric, saturated with faint traces of his scent, anchoring her to a past she wasn't yet ready to release. Pale skin brushed against the faded cotton, the shirt too large, a visual metaphor of the spaces left empty, the voids echoed in every darkened corridor. The house breathed with unsettled memories. The walls seemed to hold their collective breath, timorous and expectant, as whispers drifted in from long-forgotten rooms. Mary's gaze skimmed the shadows cast by the evening gloom, those narrow, winding halls that had once known love and laughter, now heavy with silence and shadows. Her chest tightened, a silent struggle between the aching desire for peace and the torment of echoes yet unsilenced. Every corner seemed to carry a fragment of past voices, his laughter, their whispered promises now reduced to spectral murmurs that grazed her consciousness with bittersweet agony. She moved slowly, her footsteps uneven and hesitant, trailing fingers along the banister's worn wood. The coolness of the walls seeped into her skin, stirring an unsettling chill. Doubt and fear mingled a tempest in her chest, casting long shadows over her fragile resolve. In the dim light filtering through dusty windows, photographs lined a faded mantelpiece, faces frozen in time harboring stories untold. Her eyes settled on one faded wedding photo. The young couple smiling through a haze of joy, the vestiges of happiness flickering dimly against the gathering dusk. Mary's breath hitched as the stillness pressed in, her mind playing cruel cinema of grief-fragmented memories looping relentlessly, each a cruel echo of a life forever altered. The creak of the settling house punctuated the suffocating quiet, the murmur of shifting foundations, uncertain and unsteady as the fragile terrain beneath her feet. A soft whisper brushed her Iris name, carried on a breathless wind, pulling her deeper into the web of grief and unspoken questions. Surrounded by the scents of aged wood and fading fabric, she fought the urge to collapse beneath the weight of haunting solitude. Minutes slipped like drifting shadows as tears traced silent tracks down her cheeks, hot against the chill that enveloped her. Yet within that pain stirred a subtle flicker, a delicate thread weaving through the dense fabric of loss, a tiny beacon shimmering amid encroaching darkness. Her gaze lifted to the staircase leading upward, the path to the attic sealed by time and silence. A faint, distant melody, soft, haunting, seemed to hover at the edge of hearing, a tender refrain that stirred something deep within. The wedding song. The camera held on Mary, caught between fear and curiosity, her hand trembling as it reached out toward the staircase, poised on the threshold of unresolved memories and the whispered promise of awakening. The house settled behind Mary with the subtle creaks and groans of a weary old soul, the timbered bones whispering secrets in the encroaching twilight. She stood alone in the dim living room, hands clenched at her sides, the oversized flannel shirt swallowing her slender frame, a fragile shield forged from echoes of a happier past. Outside, wind twisted through amber leaves, their rustling chorus like murmurs from a forgotten time. The weight of solitude pressed against her, cold and unyielding, pressing through every cracked pane and shadowed corner. Each gust that rattled the windows like ancient sighs dredged buried memories from the depths, a collage of laughter, love, and loss that the walls seemed to mourn in her stead. As the last shriveled sunlight bled from the sky, the low hum of a haunting melody crept through the hushed house. Mary's breath caught tentative, tremulous, yet piercing, the unmistakable strains of their wedding song playing faintly from the attic above. Her heart stuttered as she glanced toward the narrow staircase leading upward, each step steeped in hesitation and dread. The music swelled, fragile and fractured, like a ghost trapped between then and now. Shadows flickered and danced across the peeling wallpaper, the attic's door ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness that seemed to pulse with unseen life. A shiver ran down her spine, not of cold, but of something charged, invisible and relentless. The house seemed to inhale, the air thickening with heavy breaths of memories refusing to rest. Mary's trembling hand lifted, brushing a stray lock of hair from her pale face as she pressed her palm against the wall, grounding herself in the familiarity of splintered wood and faded paint. Her eyes flooded with tears held too long, both for the man she had lost and the woman she feared she was becoming. Yet amidst the ache, a burgeoning flame flickered, an unspoken summons from the depths of her heart swelling with fleeting courage. The wedding song, once a symbol of irrevocable loss, now whispered promises of confrontation, of reckoning, and perhaps, redemption. The creaking floorboards beneath her feet spoke of the fragile instability that marked her life, yet her gaze hardened, resolve weaving through the threads of grief. She took a measured step forward, drawn inexorably toward the attic, the repository of shadows and secrets. Each footfall was a tentative defiance, a breaking of silence. The house moaned softly, as if warning of the past's awakening, but Mary pressed on, the haunting melody weaving through her veins, a spectral thread tugging her upward. With lungs filled full of damp, cold air, she climbed, the narrow stairs constricting yet insistent. As she crossed the threshold, the music abruptly halted, leaving a void pregnant with silence and shadow. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom, where dust motes floated like suspended memories. There, on the floor among forgotten trinkets and aged photographs, lay a single untouched letter. It gleamed faintly under the moonlight, filtering through a cracked window, a beacon amidst the darkness. Mary knelt slowly, fingers hovering before curling around the fragile parchment, a key to unlocking the labyrinth of love and loss that bound her past and future. The camera lingered as she unfolded the letter, the soft rustle, a fragile sound that filled the vast silence. Her breath caught. This moment, charged with dread and possibility, was the fragile spark igniting the journey into the unknown. Outside, the wind stilled, the house held its breath, and Mary's world shifted subtly yet irrevocably, poised on the edge of revelation and transformation. Mary stood at the foot of the attic stairs, heart pounding in slow, echoing beats that matched the creaks of the old house settling around her. The faintest autumn light filtered through a dirty, cracked window, casting long shadows that stretched and shifted like restless ghosts across piles of forgotten memories. Every breath she took was thick with dust and unfinished stories. Her fingers brushed against the peeling banister, rough and cold to the touch, grounding her amid the swirling tempest in her mind. The wedding song, once distant and haunting, now hummed faintly against the silence, weaving through her thoughts and dredging up long-buried feelings, love, loss, regrets whispered in the dark. Mary stepped cautiously into the attic, the wooden floor groaning beneath her weight, each board a chorus of both welcome and warning. The air was heavy, a tangible presence wrapping around her like an unseen shroud, as if the space itself held its breath in anticipation. Her gaze swept over the scattered remnants of their shared life, faded photographs, a cracked jewelry box, yellowed letters tied with a fraying ribbon. She picked up a delicate silver locket, warm despite years of neglect, and pressed it against her chest. These tangible echoes of the past were both a solace and a torment, reminders of the man she loved and the void his absence had carved into her world. The sound of the music grew slightly louder, a melancholic melody that seemed to seep from the very walls. Mary's breath caught. She whispered, "Why won't you let me go?" A cold draft slid across the room, ruffling loose papers and extinguishing a lone candle flickering on a dusty shelf. The darkness pressed inward, chilling her bones and igniting a primal fear that perhaps some memories were better left locked away. Still, drawn by a fragile thread of courage, she moved deeper into the attic, her footsteps tentative yet determined. She found an old photograph, edges curled and torn, showing unfamiliar faces who seemed both distant and intimately entwined with her story. Her fingers trembled as she traced the outline of a smile she wasn't sure she recognized. The music ceased abruptly, plunging the room into a silence so profound it rang in her ears. From that stillness came a whisper of voice, fragile yet unmistakably hers, breathless words that hovered just beyond comprehension. Frozen, Mary stared into the lingering darkness, the attic now transformed into a sanctuary and a prison both. The veil between past and present thinned, exposing secrets that threatened to unravel the fragile threads holding her together. Her heart raced, each beat a question unanswered. What truth lay hidden in the shadows? Who, or what, waited to be found? The camera held on Mary's face, illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight, eyes wide with a reluctant resolve. The line between reality and memory blurred as she took a slow, steadying breath, ready to confront the haunting echoes that called her forward into the unknown. The attic shuddered with each hesitant footstep Mary took, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight like the house itself was awakening from a long, restless sleep. Shadows clung to every corner, pooling in the recesses with a sentience that made her skin crawl. The faint strains of their wedding song, now distant and melancholic, seemed to ripple through the stale air, stirring memories she desperately tried to suppress. Mary reached out, fingers trembling as she brushed aside a thick layer of dust covering an old wooden box. The scent of aged paper and forgotten promises filled her nostrils, pulling her deeper into a past she thought she understood but now doubt clouded. Inside the box lay trinkets they had once shared, photographs etched with smiles frozen in time, a delicate silver watch stopped at the hour of his last breath, and letters folded with care, their edges yellowed with age. As she sifted through the memories, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing the candle to flicker violently before plunging the attic into suffocating darkness. A rattling sound echoed from the far wall, the subtle scraping of something moving just beyond sight. Heart pounding. Mary's breath caught in her throat, the silence thick and oppressive. She whispered to the empty room, "Is it you?" A soft, incomprehensible whisper drifted toward her from the shadows, but she could not tell if it was a fragment of the past or the fragile fabric of her mind unraveling. The temperature dropped sharply, icy fingers grazing her neck, and the whispered notes of the wedding song floated eerily through the darkness. Mary's fingers clenched the edge of the box, knuckles white, as she forced herself to step closer to the source of the sound. Each movement was tentative, laced with a fragile courage born from grief and desperation. Then, as a sudden gust of wind threw open the attic window, a flurry of old photographs scattered across the floor, some faded, others startlingly clear, revealing faces she didn't recognize among the familiar lines of their family tree. Her breath caught as she recognized one photograph pinned beneath the Palea wedding photo, but not theirs. It depicted her husband, yet beside him stood ominous figures, strangers who wore knowing smiles that chilled her to the bone. A sharp intake of breath escaped her lips, breaking the fragile silence. The music stopped abruptly as if severed by an invisible hand, and the attic fell into profound darkness. From the depths came a whisper, soft, deliberate, and laden with meaning. Mary. A name carried on the cold air, neither comforting nor cruel, but utterly unknown, pulling Mary to the brink of a revelation that threatened to shatter all she believed. The camera held on her pale face, framed by the faint moonlight, eyes wide and shimmering with a tumult of fear and resolve. The screen faded slowly to black, the haunting final note hovering, an unspoken promise of secrets about to unravel and a truth demanding to be confronted. Mary's hands trembled as the fragile diary rested on her lap, its cracked spine begging to be opened to a truth long concealed. The grim weight of shadows from the attic walls inveighed upon her fragile courage, but the silent pull of the past demanded reckoning. A faint shimmer of pale moonlight slipped through a cracked window, casting mottled illumination over the faded pages, inviting her to read what had been hidden. As she turned each brittle sheet, the atmosphere thickened, the creaks of the aging house intensifying, the stale air swirling with invisible whispers. The diary's ink, smudged and faint, painted a portrait of secrets and deception intertwined with love and doubt. These were the words of the man she mourned, the husband who had been both partner and enigma. Her breath hitched as entries unfolded, revealing a clandestine life, a double existence that eroded the foundation of their shared history. She read of fears, unsaid desires, betrayal woven beneath tender facades. Each sentence tore at the fragile scaffolding of memories she cherished. The wedding song, a spectral thread throughout her grief, seemed to echo faintly now in the distant attic, as if responding to the revelations jilting through the pages. Mary's heart throbbed with a bittersweet grief transformed into shock, love into suspicion. Shadowed faces emerged in the margins, names of people she'd never heard, moments of secrecy concealed beneath the veneer of normalcy. The diary unveiled not only her husband's ghosts but hinted at her own complicity in the silences that fractured their union. A sudden draft stirred the pages violently, scattering faded photographs like fallen leaves upon the wooden floor. Mary scrambled to gather them, hands shaking, revealing a collection of images, some joyful, others dark, faces unknown, hinting at a broader legacy of secrets and lies. Her gaze settled on an unfolded photograph, an old wedding portrait bearing eerie resemblance to her own wedding day, but populated by strangers, their smiles strained and inscrutable. The stark incongruity stabbed coldly, revealing the yawning chasm between appearance and truth. The attic's oppressive silence ruptured with a whisper, barely audible but unmistakably clear, her name, breathed by an unseen presence, neither comforting nor cruel but heavy with unspoken accusation. Mary's body tensed, the diary slipping from her grasp to the floor with a dull thud, joining the scattered memories. Tears blurred her vision as a tidal wave of betrayal and heartbreak washed over her, eroding the last bastions of certainty. "Why did you hide this from me?" she choked out, voice raw and fragmented. Her words dissolved into the somber hum of the night, the only response the creaking of old beams and the distant howl of the autumn wind. For a suspended moment, the room felt suffocatingly vast, her solitude absolute, teetering on the precipice of despair. Then, piercing the darkness, a faint shimmer of resolve ignited within, an ember tempered by pain and sorrow but fiercely alive. The diary, the photographs, the whispered name, all pieces of a mosaic she must face, to unbind the shadows and reclaim her own truth. The camera lingered on Mary's pale, tear-streaked face, framed by the wavering candlelight, a portrait of destruction and dawning strength. The final image faded into the cold, lingering silence of the attic as the wedding song ceased abruptly, leaving her alone with the unbearable weight of revelation and the uncertain path ahead. The house groaned beneath the weight of twilight, every creak and whisper a sinister lullaby suffusing the stale air. Outside, the wind tore mercilessly through the skeletal branches of ancient oaks, their stark forms etched against the bruised sky. Mary retreated into the shadowed sanctuary of the attic, its narrow space suffocating, walls closing in like the memories she could no longer escape. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the cracked frame of an old wedding photograph against her chest, the glass cold and unforgiving, reflecting a fractured image of the woman she once was. The smiles frozen in time across the sepia tones seemed cruelly distant, haunting reminders of the love that had slipped irreparably through her grasp. She sank onto the creaking floorboards, her body folding inward, a fragile shell cradling a heart shattered by revelation. The dusty beams above moaned softly, their mournful sounds echoing the emptiness settling like frost deep within her bones. The shadows converged, swirling with the faint scent of wilted flowers and forgotten promises. Her breath escaped in ragged gasps, the weight of concealed betrayals tightening like chains around her fragile spirit. Each heartbeat pulsated with an ache too profound for words, a silent requiem for the dreams unraveled. Eyes glazed with despair, Mary stared blankly at a faded diary opened before her, pages scrawled with secrets that severed the last threads tethering her to hope. The words bled sorrow, intertwining love and lies in a tapestry of concealed truths that left her grasping for a footing in the shifting darkness. An icy draft stirred the air, extinguishing the flicker of candlelight and plunging the attic into an oppressive void. The absence of light mirrored the desolation within, a numbness like sinking beneath the surface of a cold, endless sea. Voices from the past crept at the edges of her consciousness, fragments of conversations never spoken, remorse unvoiced, and apologies lost to the silence. Her lips parted in a whisper carried away by the wind. Why? A question sent into the void, unanswered and haunting. Time fractured, each second stretching into eternity as the attic walls felt closer, the ceiling lower, the space shrinking around her faltering breath. The photograph slipped from her grasp, shattering softly on the creaking floor, shards of glass scattering like the remnants of her broken world. She pulled her knees to her chest, eyes fixed on the fractured reflections, a stark emblem of her unraveling identity. The wedding song, once a tender echo, now twisted into a mournful dirge vibrating through the silent air, a chilling reminder of love lost and memories that refused release. As darkness claimed the room, Mary's fragile form faded into the enveloping shadows, a solitary figure consumed by despair, poised on the precipice of descent. The camera lingered, capturing the haunting stillness, a frozen portrait of a soul unraveling, the horror of grief etched deep beneath every silent breath. Mary sat curled into the cold, worn floor of the attic, a fragile island amid the sea of dim shadows. The faint, eerie blue of the moonlight filtered through the grimy window, casting long, wavering shapes that played over the splintered wood and forgotten relics around her. The stagnant air held a brittle chill, seeping into her skin and bone, weaving with the fog of sorrow that dulled her senses. Around her, the attic breathed with creaks and groans, the tired, haunting symphony of the ancient house settling into the deepening night. Each sigh of timber and shift of the floorboards sounded magnified, as if the very walls mourned with her, echoing the cracking silence spreading inside her heart. Her fingers clutched a faded photograph fallen from a pile of mementos, a wedding portrait she could barely face. The faces smiled innocently, the past frozen in a sepia-ing promise. Now, the image was a brittle mockery, a ghostly reminder of the love betrayed by secrets, the warmth extinguished by cold truths. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, each exhale a whisper lost amid the vast emptiness. The darkness around her pressed closer, folding into the cavernous space like a suffocating shadow. The attic was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb containing memories she could neither bury nor resurrect. The silence was pierced only by the faint scrape of a loose floorboard shifting beneath the weight of an unseen presence, a sound both familiar and terrifying. Mary's eyes darted to the corner where half-obscured objects lay in compromised order: her husband's old pipe, a cracked music box, a torn journal. She lifted the journal carefully, the brittle pages trembling like fragile wings. The words inside echoed with confessions and concealments, every sentence unraveling the man she thought she knew, exposing the faults and ghosts he hid away. She swallowed hard, voice barely above a breath. Why? No answer, only the chill draft that struck the edges of the journal, scattering a few loose pages onto the dusty floor. A cold wind stirred through the cracked window pane, carrying with it a faint, distant strain, the haunting melody of their wedding song drifting from somewhere unseen. The music, once a thread of love and joy, now wove a tapestry of regret and unsettled fears. As the notes lingered, the candle flickered violently, threatening to extinguish, mirroring the shaky flame of Mary's resolve. Her gaze fell to the fragile remains of a broken chain necklace resting near Hera's symbol she once embraced as a token of their bond. Now, its shattered links glistened with the dim light, reflecting the fracturing of trust and identity coursing through her. Mary drew her knees closer, wrapping her arms around them as if to hold herself together, her body trembling with the weight of grief and isolation. Tears welled up, blurring her vision as she surrendered to the inexorable pull of despair. Time stretched, each second heavy with absence, the attic's darkness swallowing the space where hope had flickered moments before. The creak slowed, the echoes faded, leaving a stillness so profound it seemed the very air had stopped. The camera held on Mary's bowed head, her silhouette framed by the wavering candlelight, a portrait of a soul unraveling, suspended on the precipice of surrender. And as the candle's flame guttered and dimmed, plunging her into cold blackness, the scene ended, an invitation to the abyss from which she must either fall or rise. The attic was swallowed by night, the darkness dense and suffocating as Mary cradled a fragile envelope, its paper worn and trembling beneath her fingertips. She sat alone amid the scattered remnants of a past better left untouched, photographs, creased letters, and shadowed memories stirred by the faintest touch. The silence pressed heavily, broken only by the distant whisper of the wind threading through unsealed window panes. Her breath caught as she carefully unfolded the letter, the faint lingering scent of cologne, his centralizing with faded ink and secrets spoken in absentia. The words trembled on the fragile parchment, fragile as the crackling embers of a dying fire, conveying a trembling apology, a confession too long withheld. Mary, it began, voice weighted with remorse. There are things I never dared to say, secrets I carried alone, not to hide, but to protect us. Forgive me. Find peace, even when I cannot. Her eyes welled with tears that carried both agony and faint relief, a haunting melody of forgiveness intertwined with the loss that had rooted itself deep within her soul. The echoes of their wedding song, once a lullaby of joy, now resonated with new meaning, a requiem for shattered truths, yet a whisper of solace amid the shadows. Her trembling hand reached out, grazing the pendant necklace, a broken chain they once shared, now a symbol of fractured love and fragile hope. The fragile links caught the scattered moonlight cascading through the attic window, each glint a silent testament to endurance and the possibility of healing. Mary drew a slow, shuddering breath, the cool air filling her lungs like a baptism of both sorrow and renewal. In the quivering silence, a faint sound stirred soft footsteps, a whisper carried upon the ragged breath of the house. The voice, haunting but gentle, brushed past her ears, a name, a memory, a call to reconciliation. She closed her eyes, the weight of grief momentarily lifting, unveiling the faintest spark, a delicate flicker of courage shimmering in the depths of night. This fragile glow was a fragile lifeline, an unspoken promise floating on the edge of darkness, urging her toward the uncharted path of acceptance and peace. The camera lingered on Mary's silhouette, poised in stillness beneath the dim glow of fading candlelight, a figure suspended between the relentless shadows and the dawning light of awakening. And as the final notes of the wedding song drifted through the stillness, soft, tentative, resolute, the scene faded into quiet, the echo of a soul quietly choosing to rise. Soft light seeped through the small, cracked window of the attic, casting a gentle glow over the shadowy space cluttered with relics of a life long dissolved. The house, normally a vessel of creaking and whispers, seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting her next move. Mary knelt on the uneven wooden floor, her trembling fingers clutching the crumpled, yellowed letter, the only tangible fragment of her husband's remorse she'd uncovered so far. The air was thick with the scent of dust, old paper, and lingering memories, each gust of wind that slipped through the cracks whispering secrets she was only beginning to feel prepared to confront. Her eyes, which had once been pools of quiet despair, now shimmered with a flicker of tentative resolve. She unfolded the letter carefully, too afraid to disturb the fragile silence. The words, penned with trembling sincerity, spoke of regret and longing, a confession from her husband she had long denied, buried under years of grief and guilt. "I lost myself in the shadows I cast," it read, "but I never stopped loving you. If only I had the courage to tell you the truth, to face what I hid from myself and you." Her breath hitched as tears welled, tracing silent paths down her pallid cheeks, illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the dusty attic. The weight of betrayal, of love fractured by secrets, pressed deep into her chest. An ache heaved from the depths of her soul, yet within that pain, a small beacon flickered hope. She glanced around at the relics scattered across the attic, a tarnished wedding band, a faded photograph of their wedding day, a broken locket. Each object felt heavier in the silence, burdened with unspoken truths that threatened to suffocate her. Raising her trembling hand, she touched the photograph, the edges curling with age. "Can I forgive what I never knew?" she whispered, voice cracking, lost in the vast quiet of the attic. The question lingered like a fragile thread, delicate but desperately holding her to the possibility of reconciliation. A sudden gust of wind billowed through a crack in the wall, scattering loose papers and generating a faint, mournful whistle. The house seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the shadows lengthening as if awaiting her decision. She closed her eyes, fighting the rising tide of despair, and took a slow, trembling breath. In that moment of stillness, a glimmer of clarity broke through the faintest whisper of acceptance, not yet peace, but enough to ignite a flicker of hope. The attic's shadows seemed to recede briefly, giving way to a subtle, warm glow, the first real light in the house since her grief took root. She slowly sat upright, clutching the letter close to her heart, feeling the faint warmth of her own resolve stirring beneath the cold remnants of her sorrow. The camera lingered on her face, half illuminated, eyes brimming with tears yet flickering with the promise of newfound strength. And as the scene faded into gentle darkness, the quiet hum of the house held a fragile promise. Her journey toward healing had begun, however tentative, and the shadows awaiting her in the depths of the house seemed to ebb, just momentarily, in silent acknowledgement. The attic grew even darker as Mary pressed her hand against the cold wood, her ears straining for any sound, any sign of the presence she had summoned. The air was heavy with a suffocating silence, broken only by her own labored breathing and the faint creak of the house settling. Shadows danced along the wall, twisted and restless, as if alive, whispering secrets she was no longer afraid to hear. With a tentative breath, she raised her voice, steady yet faint in the oppressive gloom. "Show yourself. I am no longer afraid. Whatever you are, spirit, voice, demoni, demand you reveal yourself." The house responded with a low, unsettling hum, a vibration that seemed to pulse from the very foundation and echo of her trembling resolve. For a moment, the silence stretched and thickened, mounting to an almost unbearable weight. Then, at last, a whisper, soft, fragile, almost indistinct, floated through the attic, threading itself into her consciousness. "I am what remains of love unspoken," it sighed, echoing in her mind, haunting yet tender. "A shadow cast by guilt and regret, lingering in the corners of your mind." She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the dim, flickering light, and reached her trembling hand, brushing the dusty air as if to grasp the fragment of her husband's spirit. "You are not a shadow to be feared," she whispered. "You are a part of meth love we shared. I refuse to let you haunt me anymore." A shiver ran down her spine as the attic's oppressive weight softened, the darkness pulsing with a strange warmth, her own resolve blooming amidst despair. The oppressive shadows receded, revealing a glimmer of dawn seeping through the grime-covered window. It was a fragile, fleeting moment of Hippian awakening buried beneath years of grief. The house exhaled softly, the eerie hum fading into the dull silence. As she lowered her hand, her breath shuddered with a mixture of relief and awe. The haunted presence, whether spirit or demon, was dissolving, releasing her from its grip. In that luminous silence, Mary stood still, heart pounding with a newfound purpose, eyes shining with quiet strength. The attic, once a place of hidden fears and secrets, now became a sanctuary of acceptance. She gazed upward, the faint glow of dawn illuminating her face, a symbol of her rebirth, fragile but resilient. A gentle breeze whispered through the cracks, carrying with it the promise of peace, her spirit no longer shackled by shadows but poised for healing. The camera lingered on her serene, determined face, framed against the softening light, a visual testament to her journey from darkness into dawn, from fear into quiet acceptance. The attic, once shrouded in a suffocating darkness, now shimmered with a clarity born from confrontation. Mary stood motionless as the shadows that had haunted her dissipated into a tranquil, golden haze. Sunlight filtered through the attic's cracked windows, casting long, warm streaks across the aged floorboards and illuminating her pale, resolute face. Her breath, ragged and trembling moments before, now steadied, steady as the dawn breaking through a storm. In her hands, she held the letter, the final piece of the puzzle, the fragile truth she'd summoned from buried secrets. The words she read again, the faint apology, the quiet plea for forgiveness, etched into her memory with a clarity that cut through the lingering haze of guilt and grief. She lifted her gaze, piercing the expanse of the attic, where the spectral remnants of past anguish had once lurked. Now, those shadows moved aside like curtains being drawn back, revealing the truth's golden core. Her skin, once pallid and trembling, glowed softly in the warm light, a testament to a spirit reborn. "I understand now," she whispered, voice filled with a rare strength, the first genuine voice of conviction she had spoken in endless nights. "Your love was real, your guilt was heavy burdens I carried too long. But I refuse to let the past drown me." Her hand clenched the fabric of her oversized flannel shirt, this shirt used now as armor, a shroud of both loss and resilience. Her eyes shimmered with unspoken determination, a silent vow to forge ahead, unshackled by memories that once threatened to destroy her. The attic, luminous and serene, seemed to breathe with her, the air thick with the scent of renewal and the quiet promise of peace. The whispering voice had faded into silence, a gentle surrender, a retreat into the echoes of love and regret now balanced on the scales of acceptance. She took a deliberate step forward, her posture embodying a quiet confidence, poised at the edge of victory over the shadows that had haunted her. The camera lingered on her face, serene, unwavering, an emblem of inner rebirth. A faint breeze stirred the dust, swirling in a dance of forgiveness and new beginnings. The house, once a labyrinth of darkness, stood silent and still, its foundations restored by her courage. The sun's rays kissed her worn, but now resilient, form, illuminating a path from grief into the calm light of reconciliation. In this moment of profound silence, she gazed into the radiant future, the darkness behind her receding. Her heart beat steady, a quiet testament to resilience forged in shadows, ready to confront the dawn of a new chapter. The tranquil glow of dawn spilled softly into Mary's living room, casting warm amber light across the space she had carefully prepared for her new beginning. The house, once a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, now radiated a quiet serenity. A gentle breeze from the open window stirred the air, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and a faint hint of hope. Mary sat in her favorite armchair, her hands resting gently on her lap. Her gaze rested on the old photograph she had placed on the wall, her, young and radiant, standing in the arms of her husband on their wedding day. The smile was genuine now, the raw pain of loss softened into acceptance. The fog of grief, once dark and suffocating, thinned just enough for clarity to peek through. Her eyes lingered on the image, and a small, peaceful smile crept across her lips in acknowledgement of her resilience, her journey through the shadows, into the light. She took a deep, calming breath, feeling the quiet hum of life stirring outside, birds singing, wind whispering promises of renewal. The house, with its creaking floors and shadow-flecked corners, no longer felt haunted but alive, connected to her in a way she refused to let her fears dominate. The memories, once snarling beasts of guilt and grief, now flickered like candles in the distance, faint flickers of understanding and forgiving. Her hand traced the contours of her face, a gesture of gentle self-compassion. The ghost of her past lingered no longer as a tormentor but rather as a chapter she had closed. The silence stretched in a moment of profound peace, a pause before she moved forward, unburdened and unafraid. A soft wind rustled the curtains, and she looked away from the photograph, turning toward the window. The world outside was bursting with color and life, an emblem of hope reborn from the ashes of despair. Her eyes shone with quiet resolve, knowing that her path ahead was hers alone to walk, not haunted, but guided by the strength she had unearthed. As the sunlight grew brighter, casting its gentle glow on her face and the room, she stood slowly, her movements unhurried yet purposeful. The house was no longer a prison but a sanctuary. The shadows and echoes had softened, replaced by a peaceful understanding hers to claim. The camera slowly pulled back, framing her silhouetted against the luminous window, a figure finally ready to embrace her new dawn. The soft hum of the house faded into the background, a hushed testament to healing, acceptance, and the quiet beauty of courage finally found. The afternoon sun poured golden light through the large windows, casting warm, embracing hues across the calm room. Mary sat quietly, wrapped in her husband's oversized flannel shirt, now feeling more like a cloak of peace than a shroud of grief. The old photograph of her and her husband, once a haunting reminder of loss, now hung tenderly on the wall, its presence a testament to resilience and forgiveness. Her gaze lingered on the image, the faint traces of tears in her eyes gradually giving way to a soft, knowing smile. Outside, the world seemed to breathe in harmony. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying scents of autumn and new beginnings. The house, which once echoed with ghosts and shadows, now felt alive with quiet acceptance. Slowly, she reached out and gently touched the frame, her fingers tracing the edges with reverence. A gentle breath filled her lungs, long and steady as she closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a profound sense of liberation. The lingering torment, the fractured memories, had distilled into a gentle calm, a quiet emergence of grace. In that stillness, she recognized the healing she had initiated. The spectral voices, the darkness that once threatened to consume her, had softened into a distant hum, fading into the background as her spirit found peace. The house, the attic, all remnants of the past no longer weapons of torment but symbols of her journey. A tranquil silence replaced the Chaosan orchestration of inner harmony. She felt the weight of her grief lifting, replaced by a tender acceptance. Her gaze slowly lifted, meeting the eye of her reflection in the glass, where a woman of resilience and quiet strength gazed back. The scene lingered on her peaceful expression as the sunlight danced softly around her. The shadows receded, leaving behind only the warm glow of hope and the promise of a future unburdened by the past and ache transformed into quiet understanding. The camera slowly pulled back, framing her silhouette against the luminous window, a symbol of rebirth and reconciliation, her silent prayer answered not in words, but in the serenity that now filled her home, a sanctuary of peace crafted from shadows into light. The soft glow of twilight cast a gentle, amber hue across Mary's quiet living room, enveloping the space in a tranquil embrace. The photograph she had hung earlier, her, young and radiant, standing beside her husband on their wedding day, now seemed more than a mere image. It was a beacon, a testament to love's enduring power, flickering softly like a heartbeat in the dim light. Mary seated herself in her favorite armchair, her fingers gently brushing the frame. Her eyes, once filled with raw grief and uncertainty, now shimmered with a quiet peace. The shadows that once haunted her dreams had faded, replaced by a sense of calm and acceptance. Outside, the world continued in hushed harmony. The breeze whispered through the trees, leaves shimmering like scattered gold, as if nature itself celebrated her journey. A deep breath filled her lungs, long and steady, as she looked around her transformed sanctuary. The creaking house, with its shadowed corridors and quiet attics, was no longer a prison of memories but a home of resilience. The darkness had receded, leaving only the gentle glow of the setting, soon an eternal symbol of renewal. Her hand reached out again, softly tracing the edges of the photograph, a silent prayer and a gentle acknowledgement of the love that had endured through shadows and silence. The spectral whispers, once fierce and unrelenting, now just a faint, distant huma lullaby of peace that echoed in her soul. In that profound silence, Mary felt a quiet, unwavering certainty. The echoes of grief and guilt had been silenced, replaced by a gentle understanding that her love, her pain, and her healing were woven together into a tapestry of hope and truth. The house, her sanctuary, had become a vessel of her surrender and her strength. And as the camera pulled back, framing her contemplative figure against the luminous window, the scene faded into tranquil darkness. The house, bathed in the final warm hues of sunset, rested an eternal testament to her journey from shadows into light, from despair into peaceful acceptance. Have you ever felt a presence from a loved one who's passed?